Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. He is Austin Roblard. She is Alex Willey. I am Ian Heston. Guys, the good times it had to come to an end eventually. Bookended by two trips to the Big Apple, once against New York City FC. That 2-0 loss started the unbeaten streak, 5 in a row for Inter Miami, and then a trip right across the river to Harrison, New Jersey against the Red Bulls ended it, a 3-1 loss this past weekend. It does put Inter Miami back a little bit into the playoff mix. They got some help. We'll talk about that a little later in the show. But first, let's talk about what went wrong. Obviously, the Pozuelo red card is where we begin. Inter Miami went up off another fantastic set-piece strike from Gonzalo Higuain, his 7th goal in the past 9 games, the most informed striker in the league, I'd say. Really a wonder strike yet again. I'll remind you of the set-piece goal that he scored just a couple of weeks ago. And is becoming a habit of doing that. But it really all went wrong with that Pozuelo red card in the 29th minute. He didn't really see Andres Reyes, name that will sound familiar to those listening to this or watching this. He didn't see him as he's turning, but gave him basically like a Mortal Kombat kick to the chest, if you could. And clearly, I guess, in my opinion, a red card. No way that you're going to get around that. So Pozuelo out for the game and really went downhill from there. Lewis Morgan scores right before the half. New York Red Bulls add 2 more in the second half to make it a pretty convincing 3-1 win, albeit we'll talk about the end. But let's start with the Pozuelo red card. I guess he's going to miss the match on Wednesday against Columbus Crew because of the red card suspension. Does anybody have any problem with the red card being called at first? It was initially called a yellow. Then upon VAR review, changed to a red card. It looked in real time like a red card. And then as soon as it went to review, I think we all knew that it was going to be one.
I was actually surprised that the referee pulled out a yellow card to start it off. I didn't think that there was any chance that was anything but a red. He pulls out the yellow. Okay, you get a little bit of a chance. But as soon as it goes to review, I think we all knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, I think the referee as a whole was just wildly inconsistent.
He's a weird one, though. He's like one of the lowest rated refs in all of MLS. I can never pronounce his name right. Faustus, he's got a very Greek sounding name.
Yeah, it's not surprising. Looking around the league, there were several controversial calls throughout the weekend. In Columbus, I know Lucas Cavallini also got sent off for something that was far more violent than what Pozuelo did. Pozuelo's red card was honestly, it wasn't done intentionally. He wasn't looking to jab Andres Reyes in the chest on purpose. It was more so ball was coming over his shoulder. He probably didn't see Andres till the last second, maybe tried to pull out of it, but still made contact. No one disagreed that it wasn't a red card. It was absolutely a red. It's just, a given. If that happened to an Inter Miami player, everyone would be screaming, send the guy off. So yes, it was absolutely a red on Pozuelo. It was unfortunate, but it is what it is. And it's adversity. It's MLS, and every team goes through this, and every league, and he'll miss the Columbus match, which we'll touch on later. But I think we can all agree it was a red card.
Well, that's what I want to push back, though, Alex. Yeah, because that's really irresponsible. Let's just say it. There's no need to be doing that. You're in a playoff race. I don't really understand ever why you would get your foot up that high. I just don't understand what he was thinking in the moment. I get what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
I just don't know why you would ever try and do that. And he has to understand his role. That the team is, it's too important to do something so careless. And I know that hindsight's 2020, but I don't know. It does feel a bit irresponsible to put yourself in a situation like that. The stakes are too high right now.
I don't know. I think it was just completely accidental. I don't know. I think, yes, he probably should have had more spatial awareness, but
can you ever come up with a time when you would ever playing where you would put your foot up like that? I guess I just don't understand, why you would ever attempt to do that. The only thing that happens from that is poor, right? Because even if you're able to control that ball, if a defender's coming, he's just going to take it right off you. I just don't get why you would ever attempt that in the first place is really where I come from on it.
Yeah, it's fair. I don't know. I think it's just because when I played soccer as a kid, I know kids, they're not very coordinated. That happened all the time. Of course, it wasn't, stuff to the chest, but it happened all the time. And I'm not trying to defend Pozuelo. I think it was just accidental. Honestly,
I
I don't think
agree
he meant
with
to
that.
do it.
I guess, and maybe it's just that I've
Maybe a
watched it
little
back too
careless.
many
Yeah,
times, and each time I'm like, what were you thinking? Why were you
yeah,
doing this? That maybe just the repetition of it is getting me down that rabbit hole.
that's fair. That's fair. I think it was just a little careless by him, and I'm sure. Yeah, Neville had a talking to about it with Pozuelo, and I'm sure once his suspension is over, something like that probably won't happen again.
And I
Just
think,
means
yeah, go ahead, Austin.
it just means Bryce Duke back onto the pitch.
Yeah,
That's how you have to look at it. I mean, it happened, it's done, it's over with. Your foot going that high above your head is always going to be reckless in this sport. Like you said, Ian, nothing good ever comes of it. Whether Andres Reyes was that close or not, you can't be doing something like that. And yeah, I mean, Pozuelo is not going to play. Simple as that. Can't dwell on the fact anymore, and just understand that Duke is going to have to fill in that role like he did before Pozuelo got here.
And let's go to another player who might not play. Gonzalo Higuain is going to have his own challenge because he, according to Phil Neville, got studs right after the Lewis Morgan goal to equalize very late in the first half. He was subbed off, as well as Kieran Gibbs at halftime. Very doubtful. I was at training on Monday, and just I would be very surprised if Gonzalo is playing against Columbus. So with that in mind, you're down the 1-2 punch that has really carried you through this entire run that you've had here. The options there. Phil had talked to me about it yesterday, saying possibly Coco, possibly Ariel Lassiter, possibly Emerson, who came on for Gonzalo to start the second half. So of those options, you still don't have Campana. So you really are very thin at striker. Coco did look good there. So I guess is that where you would start with in terms of your options, Alex? When you start to look at how are we going to figure out who fills these shoes?
yeah. You start Quarantine. I think he's been rehabbing enough on that injury, and he is a natural striker. He's comfortable playing there. There are a couple of chances against the Red Bulls where he did make a bunch of crafty near post runs that just weren't really cited by the team. And I believe he did have one chance where he glanced a header off the near post, and it didn't quite go in. But that's the sort of movement that you want in a striker. And I think you start Quarantine, John, and yeah, and then the options of Lassiter and Emerson are okay, but those guys are wingers. They like playing on the wing. They use their speed to get in behind. They're not necessarily the guys to play with their back to goal. And we've seen that sometimes work, sometimes it doesn't. But I think you have a natural striker and Coco now, and you Neville should absolutely go for it until Higuain and Campana are fit.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we saw a little bit. I think it was the San Jose game where we saw Lassiter and Higuain play up top together for a little bit. But I think without Higuain there, playing two strikers that look like a Lassiter or an Emerson don't make much sense. You still need that pure number 9 to be up there paired with them. So I think that Coco is probably the best option. I think in terms of the attack itself and what you do with a front three, I think Lassiter's got to be on the pitch. I think you leave him out wide. I know we talked about it pregame, and I think that we should bring this up for discussion. Indiana Vasilev on this team in his last performances, in my opinion, simply hasn't been enough. And I'm hoping to see Robert Taylor back up there on the right wing if possible. And I think that would make me a lot more comfortable having a front three of Coco, Lassiter, and Robert Taylor out on the right rather than Vasilev being there, because I just don't think he's been providing too much, especially centrally, like in terms of giving support into the striker. And I think in this match going forward, where you need a number 9 to have support, because it's not your 1-2. It's not your 1-2 punch of Pozuelo and Higuain. It's not even Higuain by himself. If you have someone like Robert Taylor, who has proven time and time again that he can be some sort of a playmaker wherever he is on the pitch, you need that in terms of an extreme number 9 substitute situation, and which is what we're going to have. So I think it's less about who's going to be at the top. It's more about how are they going to get the guy who's at the top of the ball and put him in good areas. Because Alex mentioned it. Coco, he showed the movement inside the box. He had that one header later on in the match. I think that he's an attacker who can play extremely smart. It's just getting him the ball. And another thing too, in this New York Red Bulls match, you look at the 5-game win streak and what happened in this one. no goals from open play. Yes, they had an outstanding XG number. There was a couple. I mean, the Damian Lowe header, later on in the match, the Higuain chance. Those numbers were
Damian Lowe had
extremely high.
two, right? He was all
Damian
in
Lowe
on
had
goal
two,
and did a
exactly.
defender, center back's finish, right?
And
Yeah,
that Lassiter
center back's
chance,
finish.
that
And there was
Lassiter chance earlier in the game too, where
it's
he
about finishing the chances, and
yeah.
it's also about getting them too. So you have to just think. And I think what the point I was going to make was this was the first game that they, in 6 games that they had where they didn't score from open play, and within the 5 matches that they had where they were unbeaten, they were scoring from open play. So you need to score from open play. It helps them a ton. So I think it's about getting support into the number 9, whoever they put there. I think we're all assuming it's Coco, and that's why I want to see a front 3 of Lassiter, Coco, and Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, but finishing has been the bugaboo of this team, like all year. I mean, we can go back to conversations that we were having in May and April, and that was really the start of I think them trying to solve those problems, which is when they started to improve. You saw a little more of a potent offense that really started with Campana, then that got carried over to Higuain. This problem will compound itself again too, because the news coming out yesterday that also they might be without DeAndre Yedlin, who's questionable for the game. Phil described it as a dead leg. Makes sense. He's played nearly 1,400 minutes this season. It's the most that he's played since 2019, back when he was at Newcastle. So never played that much for Galatasaray. So I think, I guess I understand it. Both Noah Allen and Harvey Neville making the trip as possible replacements for him if he cannot go. That's why you made these moves. That's why you called them up to a senior roster. Talk about trial by fire, though, right, guys? Like, for you to make your first start, your first minutes in MLS for Harvey Neville, possibly to be thrown into this situation, is a big ask. So that's why I'll go back to your point, Austin, about Robert Taylor, and I think that makes it even more of a necessity for him to be there, is because we've talked all year long about when you haven't had it going for Gonzalo, when you haven't had it going for Campana, where else did you find that offense? Well, you found it on that right flank with Yedlin and Taylor working together. So if Taylor's more comfortable being on offense up there, maybe if you do have a Harvey Neville who does like to get up the field just like Yedlin does, it might make him a little more comfortable. It might be a natural sort of fit to allow that maybe another attacking option, but also more comfort along that right side.
I completely agree. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, same.
I mean, I remember it was a
Good
couple
point.
games ago we talked about the imbalance in the attack. I can't remember the game that it was, but between the combination play with Taylor and Yedlin compared to what Lassiter and McVay were doing, there was even that one passing network chart that you showed me in the press conference. I don't know if you remember, but you saw the separation between McVay and Lassiter. And you saw how close Taylor and Yedlin were. So I think that if Taylor can provide that for Harvey Neville, if he is to start because of this Yedlin dead leg, or even play 45 minutes if Yedlin can't go all 90, then 100%, that's who needs to be there for multiple reasons. And I think maybe there was a little bit of a thought of that going into this stretch of games where you had a midweek one coming up and the rest that Robert Taylor got. Granted, you didn't know the injuries were going to happen, but at the same time, you have to be ready for any and all situations. And Taylor's been playing a ton. He's been playing everywhere, all over the pitch. And if you need him in a game like you do now, you want him to be ready, fresh, fit, and good to go. So I think that's an outstanding point.
Yeah, especially with Robert Taylor's work rate. If he lines up on that right hand side with Harvey, he could help track back a lot, and Harvey doesn't have to go through that trial by fire. So yeah, that's a really good point you guys bring up. And considering Robert Taylor didn't start that last game, he'll be fresh and ready, and they're definitely going to need their bench heading into these next couple of games.
I do want to touch on that second half against Red Bulls. They did play a majority of it 10v11. Red Bulls did get a red card of their own, which the referee oddly, like off a second yellow, I don't think that he realized that
he didn't. Yeah,
he gave him the first yellow. That was very bizarre. Yedlin had to like go up and remind him that was in fact his second yellow. As the player was like already off the pitch, everybody but the referee seemed to realize that, which was bizarre. But that second half, I guess I always take when you're down a man with a grain of salt, however you play. The Daniel Edelman goal, this is a 19-year-old kid. He's a rising star for their program. If you haven't heard the name, you're going to hear it a lot in the coming years. So I guess I can live with that one. The Caden Clark one, Drake would probably tell you he should have saved. I think that's a fair criticism. I think it's a fair criticism, maybe on all three goals. Is there any like one? Yeah, I think that like Drake had a good game from the fact that he had 5 saves, but that was because he was under pressure. But also didn't have a good game because a lot of those goals they kind of just snuck in on him. Let's talk about Drake. He's really solidified himself as the number one. I think that Phil's even alluded to that and said that he took control of it while Marsman was hurt. But I do think that having gone with the conversation that we had last week about the goalkeeping situation, it's a little difficult now to have a game like that where Drake's probably got a chip on his shoulder come Columbus. I think that he would admit that as much.
Yeah, and I think
well, just nodding. Yes, we're all in agreement.
No, yeah, it's fair to say that some of those goals should have been saved, but at the end of the day, offense needs to score as well. So Drake can only do so much. Standing on his head, trying to bail Inter Miami out during certain occasions. But at the end of the day, Lassiter should have scored that chance. Damian Lowe should have scored that chance. So many chances that were missed. And I'm sure the team would agree with that, but at the end of the day, I don't think there's a blaming game going on with Inter Miami. I think they're, brush it off, go on to the next game. And, the Columbus match will be super important. The Crew haven't been too good as of late. Of course, they have Cuco Hernandez. I believe that's their new designated player who's just been, tearing up the league. And it'll be difficult as well. So, but yeah, I think some of those goals should have been saved. But at the end of the day, offense needs to work as well. So.
Yeah, the one thing that baffles me is seeing people call for Calendar to already be replaced after one performance. Like the team didn't score an open play goal. Like, could we talk about that fact too, as well as the fact is, yes, I would say 2 of them 100%. Drake Calendar is definitely going to want to have back, especially the Caden Clark one. And I mean, I'll be honest. I was a goalkeeper in high school. I understood the pressure that comes with the position, and I'm sure everybody does, even from an outside perspective. One game's not enough for me to say that this guy's not the starter. And after the conversation we had last week, talking about this situation, and especially with Marsman in behind him, and granted, Marsman is extremely quality. You don't ruin a player's confidence after a bad performance like that. Granted, even if he had a better performance, Miami still could have lost the game because they were not scoring goals. You don't do that to a player, especially as a coaching staff who needs to put their faith in a young guy who they probably want to keep around and who's coming up on a contract extension. So
Phil even said earlier this week, he said he is the future. So I think, and then I think that that's like the thing that you should say like you had mentioned, to keep his confidence high. It's one game, and it's not even like an egregious. It's not like he had like an Alex Bono gaff that, like, it was just a little bit
this isn't Karius in the Champions League final, guys. Like, this is not that bad. And I think that for anybody who's really calling for Marsman to get the start, you've not understood what Calendar has done for this team in the last couple of months, and you don't understand the ramifications that come with Marsman's contract and the decision that has to be made. You need to ride with this guy till the end of the year 100% of the way, or else you're going to get yourself in a worse situation than you're already in. And if you want to go check out what we're talking about, go look at our YouTube video on the Heron outlet that we discussed this goalkeeper situation. So there are a lot of factors at play. Calendar has been quality for months on end at this point. He came into a situation where he looked like he was going to be the number 3 and solidified himself as the number 1. So 100% you need to ride with this guy and say that, we back him. We have the trust in him. The defense will step up a little more too, and they'll figure this out.
And you bring up a good point, Austin, that you say it's been going on for months. Well, we've been talking a lot about the immediacy of the run, the unbeaten streak that they've had that has propelled them up the standings into right now a net 6th place if the season were to end today. But saying that it's been going on for months, the only reason that they're in that position to have been able to make that run is the points that they gained, back in May and June.
Yeah.
Pre-Atlanta. That they were able to make that run on to be able to put themselves in this position. They also a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde from their playoff rivals. I want to get into that from the results this past weekend. Toronto goes on the road, wins 2-0 against Charlotte. Cincinnati and Columbus, hell is real. finishes with late drama, a very exciting drama. They're still arguing about where feet are located and how long legs are of Derek Etienne in the state of Ohio right now. But that finishes a 2-2 draw, which is ideal for Inter Miami if you were going through it. Not ideal for Cincinnati, who would have jumped up and really gives an opportunity. We'll get to the Columbus game a little later, but you keep going down. Chicago drops at home 2-0 to Montreal, who I believe Montreal's unbeaten in the Eastern Conference since April, like quietly, which is astounding. You know, some of those are like draws, like the Inter Miami game, but they're quietly still. I can't believe for a team that is pretty much right now locking in second place in the East. That we still aren't really sure if they're that good. Phil called them the best team in the conference earlier this season. So another win for them. Then we go to Sunday, and Sunday was weird. Let's just call it that.
Yeah.
Atlanta DC was weird. Atlanta comes back to win 3-2. NYCFC let us down with a last second goal by Tesho Akindele to give Orlando a 2-1 win in what was the definition of Florida weather. Completely torrential downpouring in the first half and hot and humid with no rain at all in the second half. It was hilarious to watch. But the nightcap really did help Inter Miami as the Galaxy went on the road and defeated Revs 2-1. That is the big one, I think, because so much of Inter Miami's playoff hopes are going to rely on Cincinnati and the Revolution dropping points because they don't get to play them anymore. A lot of the other teams they're in control of, they play Orlando still. They play Columbus twice. They still have a game at Chicago coming up. Those teams, they have another one against Toronto. So they're going to be able to control their own destiny against those teams. They don't control it against New England and Cincinnati. Well, they do in the fact that they are above them right now going game by game, but they can't directly affect them. So losses and draws by those teams in particular are much more important when you're looking at it. The other games, you only have no one to blame but yourself if you wind up falling to those teams.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now, and I mean, Miami controlled their own destiny 100% to make the playoffs. I would say they probably even control their own destiny to make fifth place and jump Orlando, but kind of not really. They're pretty much on the same record besides the one more win that Orlando has. But granted,
they need to win the home game by 2 goals. If they won that home game by 2 goals,
and then you have it. So it's pretty much that simple. And yeah, I didn't really notice how close the Cincinnati, New England, Toronto crew was. Even Atlanta as well on 33. They're only 3 points back of Miami, and you don't play them again. So you've got to pick up points. And that, in my opinion, puts the Columbus games, both of them, it makes them even more crucial because if you're allowing, not only is Columbus in 7th place and has a game in hand and is on the same amount of points as you, but dropping points then is allowing other teams to then catch up. So it amplifies the situation to a magnitude that's on another level. In this playoff race, every single game, you're going to hear cup final, cup final, cup final, cup final, just nonstop. That's the only thing you're going to hear from Phil Neville and the players, because it's exactly what it is. You cannot take the risk anymore. And as much as you want them to drop points and you're hoping for it, you can't count on it. You can't bank on it. So you need to start picking up points. This New York game, I think, Ian, when we were all discussing it and the implications of it, it was almost not necessarily a throwaway game. It was one of the ones like if you get, you're happy with, but if you did drop it, you're still in an okay situation. Miami's still in an okay situation, but at the same time, they could have had, which is something we all would have loved. They could have had a much better chance at hosting a playoff game, and in my opinion, that would have been amazing. But it's all gone and lost there. I think
have a question for you guys on that. Because, I did go into that game, the Red Bulls game, thinking that, whatever happened, that's just gravy, that I wasn't counting on anything. How much of that changed 30 minutes in, basically, the first half hour, right before the Pozuelo red card? Because you're up a goal, you're playing really well. They were clearly the better team for the first third of that game. Then all of a sudden, a game that felt like, whatever, see what you can get out of it, felt like, oh, okay, this is like a real opportunity. And I wonder if that's like what went into the psychology of it, with Phil being frustrated after the game, with people, upset. Everybody's always kind of upset after a loss. It's just human nature. But the fact that they played so well in that first half hour, they were up 1-0. they looked to be in control, and the red card just flipped everything. I wonder psychologically how much that goes into play of like, man, like that it almost makes it worse.
I don't think that it helped that Lewis Morgan scored 2 minutes before halftime either. I think that was another like not necessarily nail in the coffin type thing because it's still 1-1. But when you're up 1-0 with 45 minutes to play and down a man and it's 1-1 and you have 10 minutes, 10 men team and you have 45 minutes to play, it's a completely different game. Completely. Like they can hold on and bunker onto a lead. And maybe even, Ben not break and only give up one goal with the last 45. But when Lewis Morgan scores, it's a completely different philosophy for both sides because now Red Bulls say, yes, I can score. I can go on the front. We're going to push. We're going to push. We're going to push. And Miami are in a situation where going into that second half, they had to start going for goals. And we saw that. That's where a lot of their chances came from. So it's a tough one. And I think that, your hopes were definitely up when you look at 39 points on the table and you saw where they were and where they could be in fifth place and then fighting for fourth. I think they'd be only 2 points behind with the game in hand if they would have won that game. Looking at hosting a playoff game, everything changes. Now it completely changes. And that's the thing about the Eastern Conference this year. And even some parts in the West, how tight everything is and how everybody just knows that the parity in this league is insane and going down to the decision day is almost inevitable at this point. It always will be, always is. And that's what we're going to be looking towards.
Yeah. And I think that's an accurate assessment, Ian. I thought that, if Miami could have gotten a result, maybe a draw, maybe a win out of this, it would have been good. But at the time, I think when it was still 0-0, it was more like, okay, let's see if they can get a result. After they went up, I think everyone was like, okay, let's see if they can win here. And then after the red card, I think it was more so frustration and, maybe they let an opportunity slip from them and then as the game went on and they continued they went down 3-1. It was more so, okay, let's regroup. Let's get to the next game. And they didn't drop significantly in the standings either. So, I think it was more of a lost chance, but I don't think they were necessarily banking on it. Of course, they want to win every game, but I think, you've said it earlier in podcasts we've recorded that, they can afford to drop one of these games. So, and I think the Red Bull game was probably that one. So.
And Collini even alluded to this earlier. He had an interesting quote where he talked about the importance of road wins in MLS. That the way that you shoot up the standings is by winning on the road. Phil's talked about it a lot with this 3-game road stretch with Red Bull's Crew coming up this week, and then next weekend with Chicago. That so many teams are so good at home. Inter Miami's got one of the best home records in all of MLS. The difference between your LAFCs and your Philadelphia Unions and your Inter Miamis of the world is winning on the road. And that's really where you can gain traction to rise up the standings. So with that in mind, it now, like you had alluded to, Alex, that this, you did have the option of like a throwaway game, which this kind of winds up being, I guess, in theory, and you were helped again by your rivals not picking up points, right? Not a lot of wins across the board. Orlando, Atlanta, Toronto, that's really it. So you did get help, and they got help when they lost to NYCFC with nobody winning as well. So they really have had the benefit of the doubt on that. Now, though, it does put the pressure to get results. I think at least like 4 points from these next 2 games. You have to look at nabbing one of them and hopefully get a result off the other. If you get that, you still have 3 home games. You'd be at 40 points with 3 home games. You're starting to feel pretty good. That playoff projected cut line is still at 45. Inter Miami is still projected to get 45 points. They started the league with a playoff odds of 53%. That went as far down as 45% after Orlando won, shot back up to 48% after New England lost. So they're right about 50-50 if they'll make it. The interesting part to me, at least as we have this conversation, is I had expected by this point in time for the pack to have pulled itself apart a little, for maybe like Chicago, Atlanta, Toronto, Charlotte to be further down away, and this to be maybe like a 4-team conversation for 2 spots instead of still it being a 9-team conversation for 3 spots. I thought by now it would have we would have waned down the field just a little, which is why I guess you still have cause for concern with how much scoreboard watching you are, how many games you need to be paying attention to. Which even like to finish the point, sorry, is like when you talk with the guys around the team, what they'll say is we can only focus on ourselves. And a lot of the time, that's like a platitude that doesn't mean a lot. I can understand in this scenario, if you're Ariel Lassiter, who I was talking to the other day, and he goes, listen, we can only think about ourselves. There's just too much else going on. Some teams are naturally going to win. Some teams are naturally going to lose. The only thing that we have control over is our games. So I guess if this was like a 3-team race for 1 spot, well, okay, you're only monitoring 1 or 2 games. That's fine. But with it being such a large swath of the pool here, it almost makes itself moot that you just have to only care about you.
And not only that, but they are in a playoff position. Like right now, they're in a playoff position. So only worrying about you is the way to go about it, because if you worry about you and you get what you need to get done, then you're in the playoffs. It's that simple. And you don't need to monitor those other games, those however many, it's so many different teams now, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, 100% right now, that reigns true and reigns supreme over everything. They just need to worry about themselves.
Yeah, I agree with all of you guys. Nothing really to add here. MLS is such a growing league, and there's so many teams. You can only really focus on your club. You can scoreboard watch, when you need to, but at the end of the day, Miami just need to pick up points.
All right, guys, let's talk the game this week at Columbus, the last opponent in the Eastern Conference that Miami has not played this year. Odd scheduling in MLS, right? But they do end the last 2 of Toronto and Columbus. Those were the 2 teams that they didn't play until the very end of the year. Columbus will shortly make the return trip to Drive Pink Stadium in a couple weeks' time. But for now, it's a game in the capital of Ohio, in Columbus, and a beautiful new stadium that they have. It's always a great, put that on your list if you're going to go to an away game. That's a really good one to go to. And a Columbus team that I can't say is flying high, because they seem to just draw week after week after week. So they haven't really been able to get probably up the standings where they should have been. But they do only have 1 loss in their last 14. So as Phil was saying earlier, they're a team that finds a way not to lose. Now you're heading into this game with no Pozuelo, probably no Higuain, possibly no Yedlin. And all of a sudden that goes, wow, there's a large hill to climb. Running up that hill is going to be a little more difficult come midweek. So where do you, first off, we did touch on it a little, but where do you turn first? Who's your comfort? What's that warm blanket that makes you feel like you're still going to be able to get something out of this game?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a time for guys to step up, really. Duke, Harvey Neville will probably start. Guys are gonna have to step up. Coco there. We talked about Robert Taylor earlier. All those guys are gonna have to step up. And it's not like the team hasn't won without Gonzalo before, but of course Campana was on the field, but they don't have Campana either. At this point, they're gonna have to dig deep. And I think the boys will definitely rise to the occasion. A couple weeks ago, Lowe, after that win against, not a couple weeks, the win after Toronto, Lowe was talking to us post game, and he said, the guys are like people who haven't eaten in years. They're so hungry for this playoff spot. So I think they'll go into this game with that same mentality and try their best to get a result. If they can win, great. If a draw, that's still good. They just don't need to drop points at this point. And I think they'll take that mindset into the Columbus match. It'll be difficult, but not impossible. They went away in Seattle earlier in the season. Of course, half their starters weren't playing, the Sounders, but they managed to get a win off a Robbie Robinson goal, and they're gonna need another performance like that.
If you're asking where I find comfort and which players I find comfort, I would say it's probably the spine going up the pitch to where Bryce Duke would probably be. So I would say Mota, Gregory, and then whatever the center back pairing is next to Damian Lowe. In my opinion, I think that we should see McVay play left back in this one. And I think that you should have Sailor and Lowe play with one another and have those 3 tall, big guys Etienne's fast. You got to rough up Cucho Hernandez if you can, keep a body on him. You got to keep a lot of things in front of you. And I think that we saw that not in the last game, of course, but the one right before that. We saw a really good back line that kept a lot of stuff in front of them. And I think that if we have that same exact lineup, other than possibly DeAndre Edlin, I think that they'll be able to do that again if they keep the play in front of them and they limit chances going towards Drake. That's where I find a lot of comfort, especially if Gregory and Malta are instructed to say, hey guys, look, we need to be careful. This is a dynamic attack. They've been scoring a ton of goals. Granted, they're not winning games. I think they've only won one in their last 6. So you can say they've lost like one in their last 14, but they've only won one in their last 6, which is crazy to think about. But I think that if you keep the ball in front of you and you are able to stay solid and compact at the back with a bunch of tall defenders like McVay, like Saylor, like Damian Lowe, then I think that you can find comfort in this game and maybe leave the field with a draw, and then you get to have Columbus at home, and that kind of suits Miami, I think, a ton.
How do we feel about 3 at the back versus 4 at the back in this game? Because I think if Yedlin can't go, I almost would think that you are more inclined to go with a 3 at the back just to give, if it's Harvey Neville, a little less responsibility. But then, I mean, are you starting Gibbs? I mean,
see, that's the question.
Yeah,
that for
like,
me, it would be, we just talked about the Taylor Neville thing. Taylor's the only one who I would trust to play left wing back. I mean, if you're going to play 3 center backs, then you are going to eliminate Taylor from possibly playing with Harvey if he is to start. You won't have that combination. And then you have to trust somebody like Vasilev or somebody on that right side that hasn't proven himself in 2022. It's just that simple. So I mean, it would beg the question of what to do. Maybe you see a 5-3-2 and you see a Lassiter Emerson up top next to each other, and you have, or I guess it would look like a 5-2-1-2 if Duke moves up forward, but then you have like the midfield 3 of Gregory, Malta, and Duke, and then you have 2 strikers.
Just
and you
wonder
don't play
if you're
with
giving away
wingers.
too much there. It just feels
Yeah,
like
you
you're giving away
could.
a
I
lot.
mean, you could be. That's why I'm thinking back 4, but it just depends on the comfortability level of what Neville is, what Neville has in this team without a pure number 9 that they've had in this stretch.
Alex, what do you do at left wing back there?
Start McVay, honestly, and then worst case scenario, if Gibbs is traveling, you bring on Gibbs, switch to back 5. I think you start a back 4 as a base formation, and depending on how the game goes, if Columbus are overlapping and numerically, superior on the wings, then Miami, then you bring in that flat back 5, and you have, some extra width and, hope for the best up top. Of course, Coco will probably start, so there's more of a natural center forward. I know he's like 5'8", but still he's a center forward. And that could help. I'm looking at the lineup from their game against Cincinnati. Columbus also play a back 4 with wingers, Ryan through the middle as a 10, a double pivot with Nagbe and Morris. Yeah, I think you start off with a flat back 4, play that same 4-3-3 formation, especially when Pozuelo's not there. You can have more of a central box-to-box guy and Bryce Duke playing that role, and I think that could plug up the midfield quite well with Gregory and Mata, maybe man marking Zelaran, and Cuco Hernandez will be up there. He's only about 5'9", so him going against 3 6-foot plus central defenders and a left back, I think that'll be difficult for him to get anything in the air. You stymie Zelaran, and so they're forced to use their wingers and Kevin Molino and Luis Diaz to try to create something. And if you have speed on the wings with Lassiter and Robert Taylor, they can pin that back very well. So yeah, I think it could work a flat back 4, but if that doesn't, you switch to back 5, you bring on Gibbs or Noah Allen, and then you change up the shape a little bit.
One thing I want to note too, one instruction that I think is going to be extremely important is being careful with fouls outside the box, because with Celeryan,
100%.
one of the key players in terms of shooting from outside of the box or even delivering balls from outside of the box into his players and teammates, that's got to be one of the key focal points for this defense. In terms of keeping everything in front of you, yes, 100%. You got to bring in those block shots like you were if Zeleryan's going to shoot them, but you cannot commit too many fouls outside the 18.
Let's talk stylistically Caleb Porter's tactics, what he likes to do, because I do think that Miami will have an edge there, even though Caleb Porter, the manager that many know around MLS for a bunch of years. I think that he's always a guy that likes to go end to end, play a very open style of game. And with Miami having the depth, having the conditioning that they have, it almost plays into their hands a little. Where the more this game gets stretched, the better it will be for your Lassiters, for your Emersons, especially Emerson, to be able to find one-on-one space. They were working a lot earlier this week about one-on-one battles and just taking defenders on. I think that if you can stretch that and really make this one of those like ping pong style games where it's 5v5 in two separate halves, it might not be the prettiest to watch, but I think that might wind up being the most effective way to counter what Columbus is going to throw at you.
I think it also has to do with somewhat with their personnel as well. They've had a couple of different rotating pieces in terms of how they start the lineups. It's normally like a 4-2-3-1. You have Zelarayan in the 10, and you have two wingers. And it's rotated. You've seen Molino play, you've seen Etienne play, you've seen Diaz play. You're definitely going to have the 9-10 of Cucho and Zelarayan. But even in the midfield, with Nagby is 100% mainstay, but they've had Aiden Morris play a lot this year, who is a Western FC Academy product. The 20-year-old American who's coming off an ACL injury, but he's played a lot this year. But him, and then they have another Brazilian defensive midfielder, and Artur, who's also played a lot of minutes. So I think that, and they play different styles. So there's a lot to be said for what Caleb Porter is going to put out. And that's why, Alex, I think your point too of figuring out what the numbers look like and how the pitch is set up in terms of, let's say, okay, let's start with a 4-2-3-1 and we start Robert Taylor up on the right wing. And we see that maybe they're gaining an advantage on the wings. We want to switch to a 5 at the back. It's not hard to take Robert Taylor from the right wing and put him at left wing back. So that, and then in terms of Caleb Porter's style and what that does, if they're going to be playing open and there's not too much midfield play, I think again that does suit Miami, especially without a true number 9, because they're going to want their runners to get in behind 100% of the time. I think that you look at the Columbus defenders, and especially Jonathan Mensah, really, really, really good. But I think that there's a lot of pace in Miami to be able to get in behind a lot of these players. And if it does come to that sort of a game, I think it does suit Miami, like you just said. But at the same time, I have no idea what Caleb Porter is going to throw out there and what they're going to try and do. But it's all going to depend. I don't know if it's going to be high scoring. I don't know if it's going to be low scoring. I think we saw very different results even last year when you played at home against Columbus, and I think they won 1-0 off of mistake at the back, and Higuain scored, and then you go in Columbus and you lose that one. It's been all over the place between these two sides. So you don't exactly know what's going to happen, but Phil Neville has proven that in his time here, especially in 2022, he's adapted quite well to a lot of different situations that's been thrown at him, especially with in-game substitutions and formation changes. At first, it was a little bit rocky, but if he's been able to catch up to speed of the league and figure things out. And I think it would suit Miami if he needs to make those kinds of decisions again.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the matchup that I'm most excited to look for is Gregory and Mota versus Zelarayan and Nagby. That's really going to be where my eyes are, especially Nagby versus Gregory. That'll most likely be a 1v1, and Zelarayan versus Mota. That'll most likely be a 1v1. So Mota probably has to sit back, be a more traditional number 6, so that those 27-yard shots might be like 35-yard shots come for this one. For Gregory, to be able to win the ball off of Nagby. Nagby is so good in that central midfield at retaining possession that when you really think that they'll lose possession and have won't have numbers going back, Inter Miami might have the chance to counter. Nagby is so good at just stymieing 1-2 touches to be able to hold on just a little bit longer. It allows everybody else to recover around. For Gregory to be able to win the ball off him as quickly as he can, as high up the pitch as he can. He's doing great in pressures. I think he's got the most pressures in all of MLS by 40 right now. So Gregory's very good at this. He's number 1 in MLS in pressures, number 1 in MLS in tackles won. This is the game where Gregory needs to show that, because if he is pressuring Nagby and he is winning the ball off him, Inter Miami is going to have a lot more success in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's similar to the Alfredo Morales. Was it? I keep forgetting the player's name. It was Jaden Nelson of Toronto.
Yes.
Not Jordy Nelson. The same tactical tweak of just pressing one of the number 6s and having him try to circumnavigate all of that mess. And And I think that could work again this game, especially with Nagby. But Nagby is so press resistant. I don't think it'll work, So maybe they'll go after Morris or whoever starts along Darlington. But yeah, we're gonna have to see some high pressing. I keep preaching about this. We'll probably make shirts out of this sometime. Just high pressing is so valuable. Certain pressing triggers are so valuable, and especially in MLS where it's not technically the best league. They can press certain players and they may not know how to get out of it. And this game could be one of those games, maybe not with Darlington Nagby on the field or Zelleran or any of the other players, but maybe they're center backs. If you catch them at a bad moment, Coco Jean, assuming he starts, can slip through and get his first goal for Inter Miami. Who knows? But yeah, it'll be an interesting tactical battle between Porter and Neville, and I'm sure Neville will have kind things to say about Caleb. Neville's such a fan of the league, so I'm sure he's been watching Columbus closely.
Austin, you mentioned them in defense, and I guess without a central striker, how do you attack Pedro Santos? Because he has been a very good defender for them. How do you draw him out? I think that's probably where you could find success. If Coco almost like drops deep, then maybe you can pull Santos away and get those wingers behind. How do you attack him in the middle?
Yeah, I think that would be like in a false nine type of role that could really suit Miami. But also, I think with that false nine role, this is where I'm thinking that maybe a 5 at the back makes the most sense because you want to have overlapping.
This is why I just keep going back and forth between
it goes back and forth because you want to have. I want to see Harvey Neville overlap Taylor if he's playing on the right wing, or I want to see whoever, even McVay, overlap Lassiter and try and get numbers and penetration on the wings while dropping in somebody like a Coco if he is to start, and you are able to not necessarily. I mean, you just draw him out. That's all you have to do, and that's the best way to get in behind. We've seen it in Miami score this way before. Higuain making dummy runs and drawing out a defender, and Pozuelo putting the ball in, or Duke putting the ball in behind the back line. I think that's going to be one of your best options. But do you do it at the 4 at the back, or do you do it with the 5 at the back? And that's going to be the question.
Alex, when you look at what they need to get out of this game, is it 3 points or bust? Because with you having 4 road games, 3 at home now, I'd like to say you could get 5 points at home from those 3 games, but you are putting a lot of pressure on that. Columbus at home, Orlando at home, and in the same week, Montreal on decision day. If as you're starting to project that out, if you can get 5 points out of that, okay, now we're like projecting here that's 41 points. They need to find 4, 5 points elsewhere. So is it 3 points or bust here, or could you get away and be happy with a point?
I think you get a point here. I think Columbus can be dangerous, especially with Kuko up top. I think you get a point, and that's fine. Looking at their Miami schedule now, yeah, it's not going to get any easier for them. After Columbus, they have Chicago away, so I think that's probably the game they're going to try to target and try to get 3 points. It's probably the most feasible game that they can do that. So I think a draw, a loss, draw, and win in 3 games is not too bad, and it will keep them in playoff position.
And to Alex's point, Austin, you'd have 10 days rest for that Chicago game. You'd get Pozuelo back. You'd probably get Higuain back. You'd get DeAndre healthier for when he's going. So you're a little more in tune, but also a point. I mean, 3 points is huge because it's directly against it. It becomes a 6-pointer in essence. But getting that draw, Austin, it almost levels the playing field. It keeps the status quo where it is against Columbus, which I think could be valuable come later on, especially when Columbus makes a return leg.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I think you get a point and you go all out in that home game. And I think another thing and another reason to maybe just go for a point here. You have the weekend off because of the Orlando move, and you have a weakened roster in terms of injuries right now, especially with Higuain and Yedlin because of the weekend, and Campana may be coming back by the 10th. We don't know which is when they play Chicago. So there's almost a little bit of a silver lining there in that Orlando game being moved because you get a break at a time in which this team really needs it. Right? Who would have thought? Yeah. Who would have thought? At first it looked like misery, but at the end of the day, I think Miami are actually catching a break here, and it could really suit them in a favorable way. So this match on Wednesday, I think if you lose, you're definitely pretty upset with yourselves. 100%. I think you need to gain something from this match if you want to seriously solidify yourself within the coming weeks. I think the Chicago game is extremely winnable, and if you get 4 points out of these two, and other results fall your way the way they've been haven't been, and teams are playing to the form that they've been in the last couple of weeks, 100%. I think that Miami could solidify themselves as a true contender for the playoff spot if they, even just by getting a point here.
It'll be an exciting one too around the league. A ton of games. 7:30 on Wednesday also has Atlanta traveling to Philly. Also has Red Bulls going to Montreal. Chicago and New England play, hopefully to a draw. That's where you're looking there. Orlando hosts Seattle. Toronto hosts the Galaxy. So a lot of very important games for Inter Miami, not just taking care of business against Columbus, but also around the league, as it will be for the next few weeks. That will be it for us on the Heron Outlet this week. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe on Twitter, on Instagram, on our YouTube channel. For Alex Winley, for Austin Robillard, and for our producer Andres, I am Ian Heston. We'll see you right back here next week.